I could see that it wasn't about winning overseas. It was about getting metrics and numbers so that the commanding officer could make the next rank.
Welcome today with Insights with Marcia. We're so glad y'all are here because I have an extremely special guest. His name is Drew Forsberg, and he is a retired Navy SEAL Chief Warrant Officer. And I had the privilege of meeting him in Dallas here recently and meeting his whole family. I'll talk about his family later. I was so impressed with all 4 children, and his wife was just delightful. And the story Drew has to tell is quite exceptional. Like, you will never believe. It's amazing from when he became a Navy SEAL and everything he's been through. So, Drew, if you don't mind, let's start with, why did you become a Navy SEAL?
I became a Navy SEAL because of 9/11. I was going to college out in California. I grew up on the East Coast in a little small beach town called Montauk Point. It's kind of a fishing town surrounded by water, but we get some surf every once in a while. So I got addicted to surfing. When I graduated high school, I wanted to go do more surfing. So I went to community college in Santa Barbara the first year, found out the waves were better in Santa Cruz. So I went there the next year. And then during my summer sabbatical that fall is when 9/11 happened. So I decided to quit college and went to the recruiter's office a week later after the swell had died down that week and told him, I wanted to go serve my country. And I had seen a movie when I was about 9 with Charlie Sheen in it called The Navy SEALs. And I was wondering if there was any way I could do something like that. And he was like, absolutely. Yes, we'll sign you right up.
Wow, just that easy. You didn't have to do any kind of go through different other areas before they would put you in there.
I think he kind of looked at me and kind of figured I kind of fit the profile. And he asked me, well, why do you want to go into the SEAL teams? And I was like, well, 9/11 happened and I kind of want to get as close to the fight as I possibly can. So that plus the Charlie Sheen movie seems like this would be the right spot for me. I surf, I know how to scuba dive. And so I just figured this would be the best bet for me to find my niche to serve my country.
It just makes perfect sense. You're already a surfer, a scuba diver. What do you do? What do you do to physically train to be a Navy SEAL? Like, I know you talked about how long can you hold your breath for?
I can do it for a couple of minutes, especially now that I'm a big wave surfer. It's kind of a thing that I need to focus on a lot more and not take it for granted. And it's something that you need to continue training for to keep up a good solid breath hold. But what I found out right away was start running. That's what the recruiter told me. And the way the Lord worked it out, my dad was running a construction company and he got a phone call from a guy, and the guy was like, hey, I'm doing the Navy SEAL screening test. I just want to get directions for your organization and find out when I should be there, next Saturday. And he's like, this is a construction company. I think you got the wrong number here. But my son, as of a couple days ago, says that he wants to go join the SEAL teams. So tell me more. Where are we going? And so the short of it is I got to go out and watch a bunch of guys that were trying to get basically waivers to go into the SEAL teams. Waivers as in, like, sometimes maybe they were a little bit too old or they had something else going against them. So they had to get this special letter from a captain, a high-ranking individual in the Navy, to endorse them going to SEAL training. Some of these guys were also looking for it to be officers. So everything kind of, it's really hard for officers to get a billet into SEAL training. So I was able to go up there and watch, all right, well, what is this test that these guys have to do? So I watched them do their swim, their pull-ups, their push-ups, their sit-ups, and the run, and how it has to be with pants and boots. So, okay, now I've got a goal to train for. And all the, prior Navy SEALs that were there were like, yeah, bro, start running. And I was kind of thinking, well, I thought we swim a lot. And he was like, no, you need to condition those legs. Just start putting on miles and get your legs strong, because you're going to do a lot of running. And you do so much running where you do most of your training, but you've got to go to chow go to get breakfast, lunch, and dinner 3 times a day. Well, that's a mile there. So you've got to run a mile to breakfast, run a mile back, same thing for lunch, same thing for dinner. So you're doing 6 miles a day just to get food. Plus you've got your 4-mile timed runs every week, plus everything else that you have to go from one spot to another, you have to be running. There's no walking allowed in SEAL training. So you're putting on quite a lot of miles.
Wow, no walking allowed. I had no idea. I mean, how awesome was that guy calls your dad construction company by accident? I think that was a really good sign right there. That was a good one. Okay, so how many weeks do y'all train before you have Hell Week?
Well, I got to San Diego for this little intermediate school after boot camp, but then you check into SEAL training compound in San Diego. And what they do is they put you in this orientation type class, which is about like 5 weeks. And it's a lot of hand holding. They kind of show you all the ropes, all the answers to the test, so that you get a little bit familiar with what's going to happen when first phase kicks off. First phase is when SEAL training really begins. That's when people start ringing the bell and quitting and all the other things. First phase only goes on for about 3 weeks. You're carrying logs, you're carrying boats, you're doing it at night, you're freezing in the water. And then on week 4, you go to Hell Week. And that's where you do all those things you did the past couple weeks, only without sleep, and you're doing it for 5 days straight, no rest. So we get quite a lot of what we call quitters in those first couple of weeks, but you get most of the quitters in Hell Week.
Yeah. So I remember you saying you got like 4 hours of sleep and you were wet almost constantly.
Wet and cold the entire time. That's not going to stop. And so then in Hell Week, what really makes it tough is all the chafing that you have, because now there's sand in every crevice of all your clothes, and you're wet and you're running. So, everything looks like meatballs, raw meatballs in your armpits, on the top of your head, on your waistband. And that's another mental level that you just have to push throughout Hell Week.
And so tell everybody about the canoe on the head, because I remember you said you practically had no hair up there. And that to me, it's just, you get such a good mental image. And what it really taught was teamwork. So tell them about the canoe, and then tell us some about the teamwork and how y'all all are like a brotherhood and you stick together. Because I'm very, very passionate about that.
Sure. It's not a canoe for the listeners. It's a boat. It's a rubber boat. It's a big rubber boat, and it's pretty heavy. It's called IBS, Inflatable Boat Small. So it's a big rubber boat, no engine on it, but you have these pontoons on the side of each, and the pontoon has to go directly on your head. So there'll be 3 guys on the right, 3 guys on the left, and 1 guy sort of in the middle that's like making the calls as the officer. So for most all of us, you're either on the right side or the left side, and that boat has to be squarely on your head. And one of the temptations that's there for everybody is to do what's called duck boat. So it's resting on your head. It hurts really bad. Your neck really is killing you. And you can just kind of like take a little bit of ease off of it. But that's what you're known as a boat ducker. And nobody in the SEAL teams wants to be known as a boat ducker. That's probably the worst insult you could ever get. And those are like fighting words if somebody gets to the SEAL teams and is called a boat ducker. That happens with a lot of the kids when they're going through Hell Week. I was an instructor, and nothing made me see red more. Nothing made me want to cuss more than seeing somebody who was ducking boat. So I had to get very creative with my cussing because I didn't want to cuss. But man, did it want to come out, because what you're doing when you're ducking boat is, number one, you're letting everybody else carry extra weight. So now all that pain that was on your head and your neck now gets distributed to the other guys. Because why? Because you're being selfish. You're thinking about yourself. You're thinking about your own head and your own neck. So that can cause injury for the other guys. And if you don't have the gumption to just say, all right, I don't want to do this anymore and quit, then it's like you're almost stolen valor. You made it through Hell Week, but you didn't really carry the boat. So boat ducking is one of the worst sins that a frogman could be accused of. But what that taught me as a brotherhood, looking back all these years, is I think that's what makes all of us tight. I'm going to immediately give every Navy SEAL the benefit of the doubt that he's not a boat ducker, that if it came down to it, he'd be willing to break his neck for me, just like I was willing to break my neck for them. And I think that sets us aside a little bit from a lot of the other special operations communities. They have hard selection courses, but when you're carrying a heavy rucksack by yourself, it's by yourself. You can take that rucksack off and what to say, jump in the truck at any time, meaning like, I don't want to do this anymore. You take your ruck off. There's a pickup truck driving next to you and you throw your ruck in and you're like, I'm done. But with the boat, you know that if I take my head off from underneath this boat, if I quit, then all my other teammates, these guys that I really do respect and admire, they're going to be carrying extra weight for me. So that I think sets us aside from that brotherhood because I'm always going to be able to give everybody the benefit of the doubt that they will probably do the same thing for me that I would do for them.
Yeah. And I bet when you go out on a mission, it's like you would risk your life for the other guys out there with you. Goes over.
Yeah, when we do what's called a close quarter combat, meaning you're going to go do a house raid. Well, when I go through a door, if I'm the number one man, my first job is to point my gun in the corner of the room as opposed to the center of the room, even though that's most likely where the threat's going to be. But I'm pointing it at the center of the room because there's a guy coming in behind me and he's going to point his gun at the other corner of the room. So if there was somebody hiding in the corner, they're not going to shoot me in the back because he's going to be facing him. So he has my six. He's got my back. Literally, when we say that term, does he have my back? That's what it's referring to. When you go in to do a house raid, is that person going to back you up 100%? They're going to risk their lives. They're going to present their front to the corner of the room, and then we'll clear the rest of the room together. But I've got my back turned. I don't need to worry about my back because somebody else is facing it.
Wow, that gives "you got my back" a whole new meaning. And how many years were you a Navy SEAL?
22. I retired just after the 22-year mark.
Wow. So you must have been very good on those missions because you're still here to talk about it. All the guns and everything else. That's good. Because I always see it as life and death at every second, which it really is. Okay. So we've talked about how you physically get ready. How did you mentally prepare? Because you guys must be very mentally disciplined. Anything you can think of that helped you prepare for that?
You know, I think going through SEALs training called BUDS, but Basic Underwater Demolition School, and you're doing that first phase where the water is cold and they'll do something called surf torture, like everyone lock arms and then walk forward into the surf zone. And then at about knee deep, waist deep, they'll tell everybody take seats. So everyone just sits down. And it's cold, the water's rushing over you, and you don't know how long you're going to be in there. That's why it's surf torture. They're going to call you out when they say it's time. Now, we do know that they have tables like, okay, the water is 56 degrees, and so therefore we can only keep them in for so many minutes. But you don't have a watch. You have no idea where and when and how long you've been in there, or if they're even going to pay attention to the times, you know? So that's the part of mental toughness where it's like, okay, this is terrible. This is awful, but what choice do I have? I can quit or I can just stay here. And I think mentally for me, I looked around and was like, all right, well, if everyone else is still here, then that means I can still be here. And I remember there was a point in Hell Week where I kept hearing the bell ring and I thought the instructors were just messing with us. But through a glimpse in the moonlight, I was able to look over and see a big line of guys ringing out. And then when they reconvene everybody, because like I said, when you're carrying a boat, you got to make sure that you're aligned with guys that are about your height. So they'll always say, you know, height line, give me a head count, sir, to the main officer of the class. And he'll say, okay, these are how many people we have. And then he'll start naming off the people that have quit. So the instructors know how less of a number in the class we have. So when he says, this guy, all DOR, dropout request, meaning they quit. I was kind of like, oh, wow, I never would have expected that guy to quit. So I guess I'm tougher than that guy. I never really thought about it that way. But that's kind of cool. I was never an athlete growing up. So for me to still be in Hell Week while other studs were quitting, I was like, well, that's kind of a confidence boost too. So between the mental toughness of knowing like, all right, I don't have much of a choice here. I'm either going to suffer and quit or I'm not going to quit and just suffer alone. So I'm just going to keep suffering. So I think that's the part that helps a lot. There's other little things that help you get through, like when you have a little bit of alone time and guys are cracking jokes about how bad and terrible things are. That always increases morale a lot. So it's not like you're silent and suffering in silence. A lot of guys find the humor in suffering together, and that keeps morale up pretty good too. So that's another big piece of the mental toughness of not getting bitter and feeling sorry for yourself, and instead just kind of finding the humor in it. We'll say in the SEAL teams that if you have to eat a turd sandwich, you never have to eat it alone. So that's always encouraging.
That's good. That is really good. I like that. If you love Insights with Marcia and you want even more, I have something for you. Go to my Patreon page. And there, you'll be able to watch ad-free episodes that come out early, bonus content every week, my personal show notes, and you may even have a chance to get your questions answered on the podcast. So for $5, $10, or $20 a month, we will keep this conversation going. So go to patreon.com/insightswithmarcia, patreon.com/insightswithmarcia. And let's have some fun. Let's keep the conversation going. I hope to see you there. Okay. So, one in how many people end up making it through and becoming a Navy SEAL?
Well, my class, I remember we started with just under 200 guys. And then at the end of Hell Week, we had about 32. Then when you move on to the next phase, second phase, which is diving, they'll bring in some other guys who made it through Hell Week in the class prior, but they had some major injuries. So they'll kind of hold them back, wait for their injuries to recover, and then send them into your class. So we finish Hell Week with 32, and we get another dozen guys from the class prior, and then you'll kind of go on from there. But I didn't have an easy time in second phase either. The Lord had another extra little thing for us and my class in particular. We went through Hell Week in late fall, and then we went to dive phase in the beginning of December. The first 2 weeks are kind of nice. You kind of like sit in a classroom. And you have to learn a lot about dive physics. Super boring, but it does help you recover a lot. And then you get a Christmas break, and then we came back in the first week of January to start all the pool phase. So now we're going to put on our scuba gear and get in the pool and learn all these different things. And little known to us, in the beginning of December, while we were going through all the physics classes, the heaters in the pool broke. So it is this San Diego, but nevertheless, it's still wintertime and it's still cold. So by the time we got into pool week, the first week of January, the pool was down in the 60s. And while you're expected in diving, when you're out diving in the ocean, to wear a wetsuit, the instructors are like, you're not wearing wetsuits for pool phase. No one ever wears wetsuits for pool phase. So I came out of the water looking green. All of us were so incredibly cold because you have these complex things to think about underwater. They make sure that things go wrong for you underwater with your air. So you've got to think about, what are my procedures? Oh my goodness, I can't breathe. And I am freezing, literally freezing cold, jackhammering the entire time. So that was an extra little bonus that the Lord gave me in my class.
Wow. Wow. He toughened you up.
I got the full benefit of training that way.
He made sure to toughen you up. So here you've done, probably back during the vaccine mandate, around 19 or 19 and a half years, the vaccine mandate is announced. What's going through your mind?
Well, I kind of could see it coming. I mean, we knew that there was a lot of coercion and manipulation to just get guys vaccinated before the mandate. So what they started doing was like, oh, you can't come to work, or you can't go on these training trips if you don't go volunteer to go get the vaccine. And by then it was kind of nice. The Lord had moved us down to Hawaii, and I'm like, oh, you mean I'm not going to travel away from my family after 19 years of serving my country and doing all of these training trips? Instead, I get to live in Hawaii with my 4 homeschool kids and go surf a lot. You just incentivized me not to get it. But I did know that there was going to be a mandate coming and a reckoning of sorts. So I had a lot of angst inside with like, man, I remember back when I went to the recruiter all those years ago, and he told me about my oath of service. You know, when you raise your right hand and say, I, Drew Forsberg, swear to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and to obey the orders of the officers appointed over me and the President of the United States. And I was thinking, man, I remember back then, even as a 20-year-old kid, like, so does that mean like all orders? And the recruiter was like, no, man, it means all lawful orders. You probably don't have to worry about that, but nevertheless, you do need to know what a lawful order is. And so I was really looking at, all right, what are the holes in this? When they tell me to go get this COVID vaccine, is this going to be a lawful order? And I could see the writing on the wall that no, it wasn't. I'm not sure how much of the drama and the story that most people know, but Pfizer, when it was approved as FDA and now they could mandate it, there wasn't the Pfizer. Pfizer put out a BioNTech that was not approved, and then they put out this thing called Comirnaty, which was approved. But the only thing that the Navy had on the shelves was the BioNTech, the one that was not FDA approved. And I was like, they're not the same thing. This is not a lawful order. And they're like, well, we say it is. I'm like, well, you can say a lawful order is a lawful order you want, but I've got the legal documentation right here that says that they're not a lawful order. I'm like, well, you're going to have to get it anyway. Or you can submit for religious exemption. And so this is where I did a lot of praying of like, all right, Lord, what would be my religious exemption reason? There's a lot of guys that went with, hey, God gave me a perfectly good immune system and I'm not going to do it. That's fair. There's another guys that were very concerned about the aborted fetal cells that were used to make the vaccine. That's fair. But I really wanted to step back and say, all right, Lord, I think it's bigger than this. Show me. And he showed me that as an officer, because I went from enlisted to what's called a warrant officer, my oath changed. My oath no longer had that little tagline of, and to obey the orders of the President of the United States and the officers appointed over me. Now that I'm an officer, my line stops at support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, period. And I could see that this was going against the Constitution. There was other Americans, nurses, firefighters, teachers, investment bankers across the entire country that were not being treated fairly. They were being persecuted against their religious faith, their First Amendment rights. And so I understood that if I was to go along with this, then I would not be supporting and defending the Constitution. So this was my duty as an officer to say, I'm not doing this. Not only is this unlawful, this is unconstitutional. And that's where my oath is. My oath isn't to obey your orders. My oath is to support and defend the Constitution. So the Bible tells me to keep my oaths. Jesus reiterates that in the New Testament with let your yea be yea and your nay, nay. Let your yes be yes. So this is why I have to submit for a religious exemption. They did not like that. They did not want to talk to me about it. They didn't want to sit down with me and have an intellectual conversation about the Constitution. They just kind of tried a couple more avenues to manipulate and coerce me, sending down some other officers to try to bro out on me. But I was like, I'm not having this. This is not what we should stand for as a country and as a military.
And didn't your oath even change to the fact where you're now supposed to question the orders? Is that right?
Right. From my big takeaway from this transition from enlisted to officer is that now I'm no longer paid to obey orders. That's no longer in the tagline. I'm paid to know when to disobey orders because my period, that sentence stops at supporting and defending the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, even if that means the bureaucracy that's telling me to do something. So this is, again, where I had to really zoom out and see, oh, so as an enlisted guy, when they said this is unlawful, they're saying I can't do this because it's an unlawful order, it's an illegal order. I'm saying it's unconstitutional. And I can't give this order. I can't follow through on this order. So I went to every single person in my shop, my command. We were the training detachment. We trained an undersea SEAL team down here in Hawaii in land warfare and combat swimmer and all these other things. And so I went to all my staff, all their different departments, and I was like, look, if anybody hasn't gotten the vaccine yet and they don't want to, I will be the lead officer to take all the slings and arrows for you because I know this isn't right. And so I will stand for you for that because it's an illegal order and I'm not going to make you guys follow it, and I'm not going to issue it, and I'm not going to support it.
That was a monumental stand like I've never seen. And we'll even touch on that a little bit more in a second. But what happened? Because I know you had said, here we are, a brotherhood, and I have admirals and stuff above me who like turned on you. What were
that was the betrayal factor of the whole thing, because we're supposed to be a brotherhood. So I expected at least the other SEAL officers to say, all right, Drew, let's have this conversation. Okay, you want a religious exemption? I'll back you up for it because I know it's important to you. I know your faith and I know your performance here. So this should be a no-brainer. And according to the regulations, when somebody submits for a religious accommodation, the default answer is supposed to be yes. I'm going to endorse Drew's package as it goes all the way to DC to the admirals over there. Yes, Drew can get a religious accommodation. We can continue to meet mission, which is train the undersea SEAL team out here, if Drew remains unvaccinated. So their answer should have been yes, according to the regulations. But their answer was no. And again, they didn't have the conversation with me about it. They didn't look at the regulation, or they just flat out went against it. So this is where I was like, well, this is why I feel so betrayed, because what they're trying to do is get their fit reps, their OERs, their reports, their annual reports to when they get looked at for a promotion board. Well, how many guys were in compliance? I could talk about this later on the deployments and things that I've had. But towards the end of my deploying career, I could see that it wasn't about winning overseas. It was about getting metrics and numbers so that the commanding officer could make the next rank. That's really how guys get promoted in the military. And so now that we're battling COVID, the big thing that they would want on their reports was how many people were compliant. And so if you didn't have 100% compliance, then that means you were a bad leader. And I was not going to fall on my sword and go get a shot just so that somebody could report to the admiral that everybody's 100% compliant. That's what they were looking for.
Right. Now that makes more sense. Yeah, it was their personal game. And I even remember learning that they had rubber stamped not yes and then check it out. For 7 years, no one had received a religious exemption, which says something right there. Yeah.
Right. And what's so hypocritical was you can get a religious exemption for almost everything else. It would amaze you how many times, if you walk around a military base now, how many guys have really long beards. Why? Because they just submitted for a religious exemption. They're a pagan and they worship Norse gods. And so therefore they want a religious exemption and grow a beard. And the default answer, like I said, is yes. So a bunch of people walking around not in regs at all because of the religious exemption program. But when it came to this vaccine, they were rubber stamping everything no.
So your case went crazy and has helped all branches of the military and First Liberty. How did you get connected with them and how did that go?
Well, what the Lord did was starting to connect me with other individuals that were fighting this. Out on the East Coast SEAL teams are out in Virginia Beach. And they had a team come back from deployment, a new commanding officer step in right about this time that, the summer of 2021, when things were getting really heavy on the vaccine. And that commanding officer came in and said, hey, if you're not vaccinated at my team, I'm kicking you off. There's no mandate yet. So it was like, oh my goodness, they just kicked off a bunch of like top-notch operators from an operational position to sweeping floors over at a headquarters building. So those guys rallied and those guys got behind a legal group. So they were fighting. So it was like, okay, there are some people already standing up to this. And I got connected with some of them. And then they tied me back to some of the guys out in San Diego with the West Coast base SEAL teams. And we kind of had a group thread on an app called Telegram. where we could kind of communicate, okay, what's the latest status? What's going on at your command? What are they doing to you guys? So we could start sharing information and coming up with a plan. One guy reached out to First Liberty because he knew that we were going to need another lawsuit, another law firm to represent us. And because I was one of the more vocal people on the thread, he reached out and said, "Hey, would you want to be on this lawsuit? I'm collecting names." So we went from him connecting First Liberty and then topping off at about 26 guys inside the actual lawsuit, the named people in there. And then, later on it applied to everybody in the entire Navy. But that was how I got in. Just somebody else noticed that I was very passionate about it, that I was willing to throw all my rank and career on the line at the 19 and a half year mark. For those who don't know, your pension vests at the 20-year mark. But I had to really think like, well, I didn't sign up for a paycheck and pensions. I signed up to support and defend the Constitution. And so this is that important. I have to put it all on the line. So I think when he saw that, he was like, okay, this will be our senior guy on the lawsuit.
Wow. Wow. And so do you want to briefly tell our audience what First Liberty is all about, what they do?
Yeah, First Liberty is a top-notch nonprofit law firm that only takes cases on for First Amendment rights. And what is so genius about how they do it is they go and find some of the best lawyers in the country who have been practicing for decades. And they ask, hey, would you use your skills and your law firm to represent a First Amendment case pro bono? And these guys have been waiting their whole life to do this because that's the whole reason they went into law in the first place. So they never really got a chance to stand for their faith, for religious liberty, and now they get to. That's in dark opposition to most legal nonprofits where they're just trying to scrounge up whatever lawyers they can with whatever funds they can and take on the best cases that they can find. First Liberty is very targeted, and they have the best talent in the world to take on these cases, which is why they have such a great success rate on all their cases.
Yeah, and taking a lot of them to the Supreme Court. They're quite a institute. So how did your family help you along this journey with the case and all? I'm sure they were very supportive. How did it affect them?
Well, they've always known that, church is very important to us. The Bible is very important. We do devotions every night with the kids, between doing a song, scripture memory, a Bible story, and a prayer every night. They know that this is something that we live by. We're the fundamental Baptist stripe, so we have two services on Sunday morning, Sunday evening, and we have a midweek service on Wednesday. So church is kind of like part of their life, and living for the Lord is part of their life. And they've heard all the stories about how, we're going to obey God's law, not man's law. So a couple months after COVID kicked off in March of 2020, the Navy came out with an order that said, hey, everybody that's in the Navy that lives in the continental U.S., you are not allowed to laundry list. Can't go to the beach, can't go to a gym, can't go to a movie theater, can't do this, can't do that, and to include, can't go to church. And so this was June of 2020, and I was like, all right, kids, look, the Navy said that I'm not allowed to go to church. Now, if I was in the Navy in China, I would never be allowed to go to church. So this Sunday, the U.S. Navy says I'm not allowed to go to church. Well, where do you think we're going to go? And they're like, we're going to church. So they knew right away. Are we going to obey God's law, or are we going to obey man's law? We're obeying God's law. So they were completely behind me, and they were sensitized to this whole idea of religious persecution, even though we've never really seen it in the U.S. So then when the vaccine mandate came out and they knew that Dad was taking a stand for his convictions, they were all the more supportive, but not the least bit surprised that, yeah, we're going to take a stand. And if this means Dad's going to get kicked out and I'm going to have to go find a, blue collar job of digging holes, doing some landscaping or something out here in the North Shore, well, that's just the way it's going to have to be.
Yeah, I love that. You've been a great role model. And I believe we talked about it off camera, but I'll have to tell everybody when I met his kids, every one of them shook my hand. They looked me in the eye. They were very polite. They were wonderful. Your wife was amazing. So what are the ages of the kids?
Right now, the girls are 13 and 11, and the boys are 8 and 9.
Wow, that's a neat family. That's a neat family. So, if a young man or woman was considering joining the military today, what advice would you give them?
I would say to remember your mission and remember your oath. Your oath is to support and defend the Constitution. It's not to get a pension. It's not to get a paycheck. So if you're looking at it for a career, yeah, there are those great bonuses that come with being in the military, but always remembering that it's about the Constitution. That's what our military is there for. And it becomes very abstract sometimes of like, oh, of course it's the Constitution because the president is the commander in chief. And so if he says to go this way, we obey him because we're part of the Defense Department, which is underneath his cabinet. So that's the way we're going. On the flip side, looking at the broad spectrum of what we're doing as a nation and are we really helping this country with being overseas in so many different other nations and helping them build up their forces? Is that helping the Constitution? Well, maybe sort of, but always understanding that what's the main mission of the military. So what's your main mission for joining it? And it shouldn't be for a pension, a paycheck, for the GI Bill to go to college afterwards or anything else. It should be because you want to support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
I love that. I love that. So what have you learned about yourself, your faith, or your purpose? And I'll preempt that by saying a lot of this podcast is about people understanding their purpose, their passion, and at the same time that changes with every generation, every season of your life. But I see where you definitely have fulfilled a purpose for this last season, and then I want you to tell us about your new season. But what do you feel about what you've learned about yourself, your faith, or your purpose over these last several years fighting for this?
I think the coolest thing is seeing how faithful God really is. There's that proverb that if the foundations be destroyed, what shall the righteous do? And so sticking up for the foundations and the Constitution, knowing that it was going to risk quite a lot, on a secular human level with pensions and all the other things. And then seeing God come through with First Liberty and winning that lawsuit, that was incredibly faith building. Like God really is there. And he really does want you to stick to your convictions and stick to what he has called you to do to be right and to not compromise on those kinds of things. So it's really helped build my faith with just seeing God come through. There's so many times in my career that are much smaller than this. So he built up that faith through decades and then really culminated this big moment in my career with the vaccine mandate at the 19 and a half year mark.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's definitely you have fulfilled the definition of finding your passion and your purpose. So you have retired, and what is your new passion? Where is it now? What are you doing?
Well, when I signed up, I just wanted to go serve my country. And then after a couple of years and a couple what we call pumps in the SEAL teams, deployment cycles and everything, I really fell in love with my community, with my brethren in arms and this brotherhood that I had. So then it became more about, I want to keep signing up and keep doing more of these deployments because I really like working with these individuals and these high performers. And then, I was given leadership positions. All right, well, as a leader, I want to make sure that I'm exuding servant leadership like Christ, who washed the disciples' feet, even though he was master of the universe. So how could I do that as a leader? So I kept wanting to stick around and serving the guys underneath me as I came up in rank. So now that I'm out, I want to continue working with our guys as much as I can. So I was given an opportunity, a really great guy, great officer, retired at the also 22-year mark. He retired because he wasn't promoted to the next rank. He wasn't given that next seat. And it was really odd because he was so well respected, so well liked. He had all the dream combat deployments. So I was like, what do you mean you're not giving this guy the next rank? What's going on? So he got out and I was like, man, even more cynical about the bureaucracy that runs the Navy. He didn't take enough staff weenie jobs, so he's not getting promoted to the next rank. Instead, he was out fighting wars. But he's a great officer, and he also has that kind of servant leadership mentality, and he wants to take care of the guys. So he got out just a year prior to me, and right away, he launched a for-profit business where he's like taking people out of helicopters and shooting tuna with spear guns. Like, it's a great business. But he wanted to give back to the community and started a nonprofit called Beyond the Brotherhood. He had a lot of big business contacts through his for-profit organization, as well as like some time he did at Harvard. And he wanted to make sure that his guys, Navy SEALs of character, were going to get taken care of after they transition out. How do the guys get their rightful place in society? They went aside and served their country in the most elite levels possible. If they hadn't served, they'd probably be great business guys. They'd probably be succeeding wildly in the rest of America. So he wanted to make sure we could help fast track these guys. So he brought me on for part-time with Beyond the Brotherhood. And then just a couple of months ago, I moved up to the executive director. And so that's our mission in life, is to help Navy SEALs of character. We screen and select them, and then we want to make sure that they're prepared for their next mission in life. And then the expectation for them is once we get them to their rightful spot, they can what's called send the ladder back down, and they can help out their other teammates, not just other alumni or fellows, as we call them in Beyond the Brotherhood, but all their teammates. So once they're placed well in society, they can go help out all of their former teammates when they transition out. A lot of our guys, they leave the hubs, Virginia Beach and San Diego, and they're going to go leave and maybe go someplace where they can get some more land, or they're going to go where their wife grew up, or whatever the case is. So when they get to these new spots, they don't have a network, they don't have a community. We want to make sure that we partner them up with a mentor, make sure they get set up with a good job. And we'll have some of these community events where they get to come back, shoot guns, do some fun stuff with other SEALs and civilians that come out to these events. So this increases their network. It also fills their cup of they get to feel like they're in a platoon again for a couple of days, and then they can go back to their regular life of being dad and husband. So that's my big new mission now, is just helping more guys rightfully transition into their next spot. I look at it as more of like a paid internship, my position. I only want to be here for a couple of years. I'm also pursuing my MBA because I also want to, succeed in the business world, and I want to make room for the next guy to also get into this incubation period for behind me a couple of years from now, so that he also gets the experience of running a nonprofit and giving the space to go get an MBA, and then also moving up. So we're using this Beyond the Brotherhood really as a good transition pipeline for guys to move on to the next mission in life.
It sounds amazing. Is there any way anybody in our audience could help you? Like, do you take donations, or corporations saying, I'm thinking, who wouldn't want to hire a retired Navy SEAL? That would be like at the top of my list of who you would want in your company. So is there anything like that we can do?
Yes, ma'am. We definitely need donations. And then we also are looking for mentors, people that have really succeeded in the business world, to help kind of like coach these guys along, give them a phone call every couple of weeks and see where they're at and see what kind of progress they've made since transitioning, and just keep up that line of communication so that guys succeed. And I say that's a lot more on the mentor, because as a mentee, I don't want to be making that call. If you offer to be my mentor, I might call you if I get scared, or if I need help on something, but I don't really want to bother you because I know you're a busy lady. So with the mentor, when they reach out to me, I'm like, I better answer this text as soon as possible, because this person is already wildly successful. They're taking their time out to help little old me succeed. So I want to make sure that I get right back to them. So it's a little bit more on the mentorship to the mentor to dial in and reach in and get that feedback. And then, of course, yes, we need more corporate kind of partnerships, so that if a guy is getting out and a corporation understands that, hey, these guys do a lot more than shoot guns, jump out of airplanes, and blow stuff up. They've run their entire organization. They've run outstations on the outskirts of the empire. They're capable of doing a lot more than just carrying a gun. Yes, we want some of those partnerships. They're right. Because unfortunately, there's a lot of those people that just like, oh, you shot a gun. I guess you're probably really good for it. Well, these guys have done a lot more than that. Like, who gets the airplanes? Who gets the parachutes? Who gets the bullets? Who organizes the training? The Navy cuts us a check, and we do everything else. For the operators that are going to deploy and do the nation's missions, that's only about a third of the force. The other two-thirds are training them or backstaffing all of the other kinds of positions to help those warfighters. And after you're out doing your warfighting kind of deployments, you are expected to come back and then be a trainer. So everybody would like to just be an operator their entire career, but somebody's got to do the training, and no one's going to do the training better than other Navy SEALs. So that's kind of how our community works. But that gives them a whole lot of experience that they can leverage when they get out. And even part of Beyond the Brotherhood is educating these guys. Hey, you're more than a gunfighter. You're more than a gun carrier. The temptation for any professional sports players to go back and go be a coach for the same sports that they were playing professionally. But, if they're able to take their mind and body to places that most people can't go, they can do anything that they want. So we want to make sure that we give these guys a good profile, understanding of who they are as an individual, how their DNA is. I got a personality assessment where the guy was like, all right, man, you'll figure sales out if you were to get a really good job doing sales, but it's never going to make you feel full. It's just not going to last. Whereas we have some guys that are completely naturally built for that kind of thing. And so we want to make sure that they know that they never have to carry a gun again. They can, it's all fun, but they don't have to do it for work. And finding those organizations that recognize that are not as common as I thought. So I'm glad that you recognize it.
Oh, my goodness. I would just think that would be the first person you'd want to hire, because the mental stress y'all have gone through, the physical stress, it's a person who knows how to get where they need to go. It's just amazing. So what's your website address?
It's beyondthebrotherhood.org.
Okay.
.org. Yep.
And then we'll put more information in the show notes. So glad to know about that. Oh, yeah. That's fabulous. That's so cool. Well, thank you, Drew, for being here today. This was just so informative, so fun. I know our audience is thrilled. Do you have anything else you want them to know before we go?
Oh, man.
You've covered a lot. Don't feel like you have to.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're good. Thank you so much.
Okay. So it was so nice to have all of y'all here today for Insights with Marcia. And join us next time for more good insights. Have a great day.